It's really wonderful to see this incredible turnout this evening. And it's really a great pleasure and honor to be able to host the 17th Karmapa. I wanted to give those of you who may not be familiar with the work that we do here at Stanford. My name is James Doty, and I'm the director of the Center for Compassion and Altruism Research and Education. And our mission is to understand on a neuro basis those behaviors and their complexity, and to also appreciate how one's peripheral physiology is impacted when you are kind, compassionate, and altruistic. And those effects are profound. These types of behaviors, if done with intention, result in lower blood pressure, calmness of spirit, a boost in your immune system, and increased longevity. As part of our work we do, in addition to research, we have education, and we have developed techniques whereby we train individuals in how to, if you will, potentiate their compassion and be compassionate with intention to maximize those benefits I just mentioned. This training is based actually on a Tibetan Buddhist compassion practice with input from PhD psychologists. Additionally, we have a speaker series, and one is an endowed lecture, one is a named lecture, and then the other thing that we do, which is one of my most favorite, is that we have something called Conversations on Compassion, where we bring individuals from different religious, spiritual traditions. We bring business people. We bring people from a variety of backgrounds who live their lives with compassionate intention, and by doing so, have a profound effect in the world. Before we begin the program, I would really like to thank all of those who work with me at CCARE here. There are an amazing number of volunteers and people who work with me closely, and I would like to thank them very much, and perhaps we could give them a hand before we start. While I am the founder and the director, the reality is, like so many things in our lives, we do nothing by ourselves. It is with the support and care of other individuals that allow each of us to reach our potential. I would also specifically like to thank the co-sponsors of this event, the Dalai Lama Center at MIT for Ethics and Transformative Values, Ming Chad Tan, who's here in the audience, why does he get applause? He's always the handsomest guy in the room. And I would also like to thank Owsley Brown. Where's Owsley? And Steve Luzow, who unfortunately is not able to be with us this evening. These individuals are longtime supporters of the work that I do here, and again, without those types of support, what I do and what our center does would not be possible. The presence of His Holiness this evening is part of an extraordinary and remarkable journey that many of you here know, having left Tibet in 1999 and arriving in Dharamsala, and then what he has done since that time as the spiritual leader of the Karma Kagyu lineage of Tibetan Buddhism. To give a more detailed bio, I would like to ask my friend for many years and the individual who is the founder and director of the Dalai Lama Center at MIT to actually come out and make the introduction of His Holiness, the Venerable Tenzin Priyadarshi.
Yes. Good evening. Welcome to a beautiful day in California. I was going to tell Jim, because of this compassion curriculum and the program that he has developed, we should make a mandatory 1-week requirement for all the participants to spend the winter in Boston. I think there's something about the blizzards. It just makes you really empathetic. At the turn of the millennium, about some 15 short years ago, a slightly younger version of myself was studying in Sarnath in Varanasi. And a young monk arrived from Tibet, and I was asked to go see him. And I arrived at this beautiful complex to go and greet this individual. And I walk in, and there he was playing soccer. And upon my arrival, he was informed, and he came inside the room, and the next thing we started discussing was on Buddhist philosophy and the future of Buddhism and religion and so on. And I was really impressed by the ease with which this individual handled the soccer ball as well as the conversation. This individual is, of course, now much better known as the head of the 900-year-old Karma Kagyu tradition. And besides being a religious leader, he's doing unprecedented work in mobilizing monastic institutions to truly care for the environment. He has a passion for technology. He has passion for encouraging and mobilizing and motivating the youth. And we are truly very fortunate to have him amidst us. Ladies and gentlemen, it's my distinct privilege and pleasure to present to you a dear spiritual friend and a teacher to the world, His Holiness, the 17th Karmapa.
Thank you. Thank you. Your voice is excellent. Thank you. I should say good afternoon. Good afternoon. Thank you. 3D, I'm speaking Tibetans, yeah. 3D, 가져다 California, 대체는 아주 California 예배 은 정보서다냠 도야 고급중 디시라 가부중 이들산에 디 도스데인데 Stanford University 디 나로리아 투브 디시라 가부중 제서 상로리아 안에 첨지다 드시를 슈아이.
It's a great joy for me to be here in California together with you and meet many new friends and acquaintances here. It's especially joyful for me to be at Stanford University and to have met so many new friends here. So I'd like to offer my heartfelt welcome and greeting to you all and say thank you for having me.
Thank you. Terindi America liada, you are team super chayare, and there 다와니 르리아 가르르다 아메리게 나로리아 추어 스머르다지 드라기 고급 총부디 나 미지 나로리아 지딘데 고급 탑에 따팅 담부르 차디와 지기급지 나로리아 두주중부지 나로르든지 드라 고급 팅 탑에 담부르 차디와 제장 대양 고주스디 아주 아메리칸 고주디 미세게 따가슈에 수셈리아 장왕기 촌낭당 다나싱기 가슈에 마오베기 가슈에 미세기 dungu isam dundu kya komba 고급 첨부 진입사배 늘미두시고 있어.
Although this is my third visit to the United States of America, it's my first opportunity to have any extended visit to any foreign country. I've received the opportunity now to visit the United States for the duration of 2 months, and I feel this is a special opportunity for me in my life. At the beginning of this tour, I have a sense of an appreciation of great freedom, and I feel that the beginning of this tour marks a significant step into the future for me.
드린데 나브르치면 디나로리아 게주셔다 토픽디 당연한 롤이야 무슨 신토입니다. 토픽디 지금도 네 상황을 된다데 하고 아마도 다들 야구시 가서 컴파이션다 가서 테크놀로지다 인바이러먼트 망부지 냠도 지 가서에 좀 되었던데 주셔야 아드레인 주산에 이제 드레인 주산에 이제 기다 가서에 나로리아 소수기 가서 시제 신의 시제로 멤버십 인디스탄데 게시알 데스 가서에 데이트 안다는 언습을 용어도
I don't remember the exact title that this talk was given. I know what it's about, and I know that it combines the themes of compassion, technology, and the environment, but I can't remember the title word for word. But the feeling I do have now is that my own skill level and knowledge level is very humble, and that makes me a little bit nervous.
How about you?
Yes. Me too.
Looks pretty good. 지당 더 가르에 지당 더 가르에 religious be랑 알이야 religious background 여비 인자 안 참참지 가르에 최저 돈에 좀제 망고를 시에제 philosophy 당 다나 신기 가르에다 좀제 망고를 시에제 다들이 돈에 망고 쉬었게 면도스 and compassion sadi city toning this shudomero something dos karesang samlo ane dromi bechibi batang dana singi arandab chimina ane kasure thujem di nalolia kanda challenge mangbuchi nalolia chalong chungbu 드시비 인자 di junsen tene energy experience someone that the kashi of the council share chat did tell some she should over some those that's a lavaching amise should over some bear amise casual that povers games
Awesome. Generally speaking, I'm not really interested in speaking a lot about religion and philosophy and putting forth many philosophical and religious reasons why you should think this or that. But I thought it would be more interesting to explore this term, compassion, itself, and what that means on a personal level. For me, I see myself as someone who has come of age in a very challenging time in history, and for that reason, maybe I have some experiences that I can share with you. So I feel that I am capable of doing that, but beyond that, I won't have much special to offer.
아니, 아저다 로니슈, 저그룹 차리야래. 제산 직동국에 계주 경할로리아, 벽이, 샤초기, 가서다. 야리에 매바, 된저기다 롱버 쿠교지리아, 겹쳐.
Lasso? I'm 29 years old now, and that means I was born in 1985.
Don't look at me. Okay.
I'm 29 years old now, and that means I was born in 1985.
1985.
85.
Yeah.
And the place that I was born was a very isolated area in eastern Tibet.
미망부치리아 가르르지 네 베나 충두 초아 간저여 땅 드네 까마바 간저 차바당 디지털이야 다 조아르 스모르 인트레스트
No.
미망부치리아래 요아레스 요르상군도 미망부치가 계제도 저도.
So lots of people have displayed interest in my youth and what it was like for me when I was young, and especially what was it like to become the Karmapa when I was so young. Lots of people ask me about this.
Lord du mercy konlia chidang da bunan shirupche soar yes debre 제상에 더더 remind somewhere betaba chide alone something just angi 다다가 버도 네 미지나다 조나 치슈 세난다도 야나 가르웨지 similar 파차 치슈르디 엔디 로드윙 젠리아다 페율 데베 디가 뒤주디 차데가 도삼정도
Lasso. But before I became the Karmapa, I had 7 years of experience as an ordinary child. And when I reflect on my life up until now, I feel that those 7 years were really the greatest joy that I have ever experienced. But not only that, I still feel that those 7 years were the most impactful on me in terms of the development of my own habits as a person.
아기두산 다 까마바 이버지 게어마네 다들 로드윈 레베컬이야 아니 까마베기다 연시 제주 슝겐다 searching group 안데 가주 바유 레체 안드네시네 가서 그주디 규림 가서 제주시베 제네 디젤이야나 까마바 임동고 시합레스
Lasso.
디컬이야 까마바사디 아주 자와첨부시 아주 지대야래 자와첨부시 자와첨부시 지대야래 이미 자와첨부시 지대야비 인자 수지게 아니 나디 장 수수 자첨부 지대야디 한능신디 차로의 삼바르지 대정겨 말다디 스타딜리즘 루브르도 간다르 교화첨부시 직신체 다디 녜섬래요 말에 녜 파마츠섬래요 말에 안다 간다
So it wasn't the case that I was recognized as the Karmapa immediately upon birth. It was only after I had turned 7 years old that the search party arrived in my hometown or my home village, and then the process was begun of recognizing me as the Karmapa. So in general, all my family had, before that point, a very strong habit of regarding the Karmapa as a very precious, sacred being, but none of us thought that that person was going to be me. That part came upon us all of a sudden in a very unplanned manner. And I didn't see it coming, my parents didn't see it coming.
다 이내 간다르 예 파마츠 accept 제다 가마바입니다. accept 제. 다 녜데 accept 제 맞아. 다 녜 토마치도서 다 가마바사디 차나 근데 제모자만 우 용거래. 제 다나시 제모즈도라고 만 우 용거래. 삼르지. 아다 지 디갈당에 accept 제 맞아서 요 말다 이미 셈이야. The easy 서버베. thinking somewhere that some of the developers dance.
Lesson. So my parents accepted this recognition that was being put forward to us of myself as the Karmapa. And in terms of my own reaction to this, my first thought was that this new position would give me many opportunities to play and many more friends to play with. So it wasn't really a choice that was put before me. I didn't really have the choice whether to accept it or not, but my initial thinking was very lighthearted. I didn't consider it a very serious thing at that time.
Ben the news ten since North America, United States, the Chunye Bina, and that Pamatsugi, Gachwe. Except she had a Kabushira, Chimera something to spare. Low Dunching a bougie, Pamegi, Zana, Jew, that trouble and dreaming of that, and that teeny. You ready? But Kabushira children something to
Lesson.
Sometime.
I think that if this had occurred in the United States, it would have been very difficult for the parents of a 7-year-old to just let their child be taken away by someone else. You couldn't really call it an instance of stealing someone else's child, but their child is nonetheless being taken away. So I think in an American context, that would have been particularly difficult for the parents. Lasso?
Volunteers some of that tradition that the makes easy some of that culture the tradition on it makes easy to
Lasso. Nor were my parents compensated for having lost me. It wasn't like someone said that I'll give you $1 million if you give me your child. I was just taken away, and that was done all in harmony with tradition. So since there was such a strong tradition of tulku recognition and so forth, and recognition of Karmapa, then that made it easier for all of this to happen.
Tinanda Keshishud Yak Pamatsu Samu Tanda di Chikaresana, or the Gamabas Chabimina, Simjing to Enching Somarwe. Sangi, the Chile Drunger of the Digi in Bemabarchese. The Diching is in the Susugi, that Putti, that's Archimurche, that the Digi Chawa Samudrungi Somarwe, Pendo Drunie, the Digimina, and Koranzung in Emina, Lord Tang de maybe in a Takandar, some Jachin Bustanzi to Sletami Dusan, taking a rally, then they support somewhere.
Lasso.
Should gain a Champuchachon something about the train.
Lasso. Lasso.
In a tea of the sometimes.
Larry. So one of the most important things that happened at this time was my own parents' attitude towards letting me go. Rather than clinging to me and being upset, they embraced the attitude that the Karmapa would accomplish great benefit for sentient beings, would perform an excellent benefit for the world. The Karmapa, of course, being the performer of the enlightened activity of all Buddhas. So they immediately embraced this attitude and said, this will be very beneficial for our child to become the Karmapa because he will do excellent things. So even though they didn't want to let me go, with the help of this altruistic attitude they had, they were able to. And that altruistic attitude in turn, I think, also was a great benefit to me and a very supportive condition for me to move forward. But of course, I didn't think about it in that way at the time.
That is Tigo sometimes Jidang Pamadu Samalo. Compassionate sad and Jabashai on the other. Karasana. Narachundu name. That Pamad Nyamdo close somewhere. As much as there's the 그다 자서머래 심쟁기 야부 수에서 좀 내어봐
Lasso.
야부
Lasso.
수에서 디나 패밀리 멤버 상원 냠도데 룸스 앤 내어마다
Lasso.
디사지 부데서 룸지 파마데서 룸지
No.
다 시스터 데서지 브라더 데서지 도와 내어마네
Lasso.
다 룸지르다 룸지기 나라라 탑산세나데 리빙 룸스나데 상원 룸지
Lasso.
디나 냠도데 very close
Lasso.
아 인두스탄에 숍 가르 정도스탄에 숍 다바르신데 파마츠에기 지 샘제 탐지 동해 미오야다 디기야 말람디 숍 다바르시 과에 되지다 양 권다마 뮤름 저 걸이야 다는 신디 순데 면함 지 과에 되지 인두스탄에 I'm grown up somewhere 간다 compassionate senan다도 제외기 딱 간다 긴거를 somewhere 만달라 드리지가 나로래 grown up 제 대비지 이미 드리지 소나
Lasso. Yake pudi.
야부 저구 구 야부 쓰죠 구
Lasso. Lasso. Tent. Lasso.
야부 oh you need to think
I got it. I got it.
oh how you got it dictionary okay
You'll see, I got it. Oh, yeah. So I think that the environment that I was raised in by my parents was an environment of great compassion. And part of this was just the closeness we all shared with each other in our physical space. My family lived inside a tent made of yak hair.
yeah all family yeah
Whole family.
Yeah.
And so we were all sharing one room. It wasn't a situation where there's one room for the brother, one room for the sister, one room for the parents, or anything like that. We were all in the same room together. So you could call it the living room, you could call it the kitchen. It was just one room. And what I remember in that very close space together with my family is the sound every morning of my parents making prayers, expressing sentiments such as, may all sentient beings be happy, may all sentient beings be free of suffering. And then again in the evening, I would hear the words of similar supplications, aspirations, and so on. So in this way, I really feel that I was reared in a mandala or a circle of compassion and love.
드니 주산에 저 땅에 잘 홀드 somewhere that Karmapa cha and the next culture governorle the education somewhere Buddhist education the traditional the pebegi and traditional education 상황 the intensive somewhere about the 제제 intensive that the 갈라스타요 that 초진이 가려서나 안 Karmapa 임바텔리아 안 가르래 강해지 가려서나 수수익이다 시부지 베지 로종 야부 시부지 해나야 아 미즈시라 되라 당게시라 메딩다 Karmapa 텔레 나가지 오르
Lasso.
가르가르다지 세르 좀 해지 아다 드레식 돈다 간다 드레식 제 총부래 드레인두스탄에 딱 간다 드레식이 나는 유림들 중요해 인두스탄에 and compassion 사디 간다 수수야 라마 망고질이야 때 라마디 상월로지 가르에 드가스 philosophy를 시에야 마임바 practitioners 말해 다 딘데 teacher 망고지 이제 드르체 인두스탄에 딘데 더블 댄스 다 갈라간 섬지 가르에 experience로 딱 좋아하는
Lasso.
다 compassion 더
Lasso. But then, of course, after I was recognized as the Karmapa, I was ushered off to the monastery, and I began, in rather quick order, my formal education in the traditional monastic style of education in the Tibetan Buddhist system. So that's when the hard times started for me. The studies were very difficult. One of the difficulties that I encountered in my studies was that I never felt like I was really adequately encouraged or praised in the way that children normally are, because no matter how good my studies would be, people would say things like, "You're the Karmapa, you should be even better." So there were difficulties along those lines, but on the other hand, I feel I did get to experience compassion in profound ways because of the teachers that I met, especially. I feel that I was able to meet many great masters and teachers who weren't just proponents of philosophy, but deeply experienced individuals who embodied compassion. So I feel that that really enriched me.
Compassion is lavina. The me mouth in the deshe, susus the deshe and moushai, ya get some trangos. Kandria compassion in the means in that stab in a teaching against somebody. Interdependence, some of the responsibility, some of that Jig Debe, and a Kandan Gingurk Samlo. That Lichi mean Tabin, but Jigmeta something.
I think all of us have our own individual understandings of what the term compassion means. But I think if we called compassion by another name or phrase, we could say that it's all about developing a sense of responsibility in relation to the reality of interdependence.
And also, Kandar Shell Zawa Sadi Kashurel Daji We Nisuton, Takanaga Pena Tisangi or Pena Kuyuk Nedunje Tana sing gender issues are down Tana see the issue Manguchi on the Ore. Take the sound law Azul lack of summer the interdependent the kind of chili chick debe than Gingur summer of the Mabchese and so suigita Kashre Randu Sambasan and Rando Ranjin Samba summer, but that the Chigi Wando Cubal Den Manguchi issue Manguchi on the Gavdi Baji also talk to British.
Lasso Shenla Tsewa Sedude.
Mare.
Jana Tsewa. Yangmina, Olaso. Shana Tsewa.
Shana Tsewa Mendo.
Lasso.
Love that.
Olaso, Jeje. Lasso. I think when we look at the way things happen in real life, we can see that many problems arise in the context of various issues, such as the environment, such as gender inequality, and so on, because we don't have an appreciation of the interdependent nature of reality, but instead, perhaps unknowingly, adopt a default attitude of selfishness, or basically only cherishing our own concerns. And I think that we can see that this is the root of many of these problems.
But technology, the culture, Shivita Yagan Rodiare, and read some Mitsame get the culture technology liaba G. Doing, tell Rawachiaki, Takandar Toshtan Leare. The inner technologies love Dusane. Da kanda kaduine chi kashwe chi update chekwa chi de chi nen demo kaduine update chekwa to simi nusane a kanda tile resource mangpuchin ro are resource natural resource da di tne nusane da di chi mangpuchi resource mangpuchi go ye chi tne nusan nga zu gi thong de ya de su su mi gi ne zu ti pena nga zu ti sami mangpuchi gi kashwe iPhone, the Manguchi Gavachigare. That thing also making them turn the Adi, Kanda project, summer way. That you may Diablolia. resource 가지 친야 batang 다가나 신디 잡로리아 아니 미딱 강에 가지 중요야 batang 딱 간다 망고증 같이 통과야만 다디 디 균세 때네 아주 다다 도나체디아데 소솔리아 라발 토야 디지불 도나체야 마도베 텔레 하버지기 야첨불이야 삼동아디 가보죠. 이 지단 재미당 아줄리아 인포메이션 상호 여아래 야첨 통하기 자기 여아래 이면에 다동양 아주 됐음디 나로서 말하다지 다른 몸이 통하듯이 주지 같이 차리겠어.
We can especially see how this phenomenon plays out in the context of technology. Of course, we're seeing rapid advancements in the field of technology, and what we're also seeing is that we as humans are coming to depend more and more on technological advancements and placing even more and more of our hopes in technology. But technology is something that constantly requires updates and improvements, and that constant flow of updates and improvements and changes in turn depends on a great array of natural resources. But we only see what we have in our hands when it comes to technology. We only see the new iPhone that we have acquired or that we want to acquire. We don't see directly with our own eyes all the natural resources and all of the human hardship that went into the production of that iPhone. And so our attention tends to remain just at the surface with what we can see with our own eyes, even though all of the information about what went into the production of the iPhone, for example, is available to us. The information is there, it's accessible to us, but still we seem to get stuck with just seeing what's before our eyes and not looking at the longer or larger picture of where this is all coming from.
The compassionate side, social interest chibo mayba. Tana social didu chibo mayba. And didu di randa drive simjin shen. And Tana singi kashure Ranle netang shenbe simjin. Randa da kashure jibena chulu mijib senan rando culture rodang mijib badile sang mangbuchiliya.
So I think what compassion involves is not just looking at our own situation only, not just looking into our own happiness and suffering only, but considering the state or the reality of other sentient beings, both the sentient beings who are similar to us in their situation, as well as sentient beings who are dissimilar to us in terms of their spiritual traditions, cultures, locations, and so on. Compassion involves developing a concern for those people.
Common ground, some of that Gangalolia, Didu Soy, but Jiguinsa, and Samololia, Tatang, Shizeg, Tatang, the build up Chawadi, a case of Shayimata. Penang Azu, the Tulor of Shikundi Yabina. Azu Tulom, which he did, energy. America Nalolia better to law Gerache Mangushi in that idea, American Nalola, Sesha may but that Jacob Chilola. Bena Yankashe, Jacob this developing country, some of that day known as Sesha, that is Zugi, Sodan and Lagachingi, the Zugi, and a Dunge, Takazukange Shibuchi. Kuzulia Kuzukange Yap. Then 기부등 아주 단행해서 봅시다. 강에 구도 이제 기부등 아주 단 선물을 다들이 인도산 딘제게 토안에 간다라. 가수에다 간다라 지 common ground 선물부터 상월로리아 디두 소화인바 awareness 디 상월로 지 가수에 inner some net 선물부 다딘 제버드디 internet internet 네 된다지 상월로지 소고 유스라
Lasso? Compassion involves realizing that our experience of happiness and suffering is the same as everyone else is. So compassion has this component of awareness to it and knowledge, acknowledging the common ground that all other sentient beings share with us in wanting to be happy, wanting to be free of suffering. And compassion involves building up this awareness of the common ground. So we can take the example of clothing and how we usually relate to clothing in terms of our awareness of common ground and interdependence. We may wear clothes here in the United States, but most of those clothes aren't made in the United States, but in other countries, and oftentimes they are made in developing countries. Developing compassion might involve giving rise to greater awareness of the conditions in the factories where those clothes are made, and the hardships that the people who work at those factories might endure. Compassion might involve giving rise to greater awareness about their situation of difficulty in contrast to the pleasant situation that we enjoy. So it seems to be the case with the purchase of clothing that we get the good stuff and they get the bad stuff. We get the good times, they get the hard times. Compassion involves generating further awareness of situations like this and how we're interconnected with others.
news stage Middle East compassion is more involved action, dedication that in Hindustan Delia Kashwe. That even action, dedication to Hindustan, the risk some of the risk child, the Basque risk. That the Yorasabdo, Jasimbo, Tadi, Tele, social Kumji, Devasan and Rado, the Mucia, the Ched and Lela, the Dare Church. The Hindustan time in the understand Chamatoba, Casamra, sympathy, some understanding that year, Kashre, Tagishivan and singing that they do so a Jiguimba, that Tinjigi, Mazugi, and the Samlo, Tin Samuch Tamato, the Degatone, you want to matter something of those. The Hindustan did use Dene, compassion sadi, Demodaza Maimba. Tigi philosophy, viewpoint, this also Rani, Periboti, Chashi, did chaver sometimes. The digital compassionate gom to Yimbina, and that compassion will involve more sort of action somewhere than the young joy or something. Oh.
We can also see how sometimes we separate ourselves from the suffering of the world by regarding it as a show that we're sitting back and watching. We might, for example, become aware of the suffering that's happening in the Middle East, the difficulties that are happening in the Middle East, but we're just kind of sitting back and observing as if it were a show to take in, not really involving ourselves by taking action or becoming more dedicated toward that situation. So therefore, compassion means becoming more involved, taking more action, developing more dedication, and that means that we need to take more risks. But the habit of ourselves as human beings is that no one really likes taking risks, or very few people seem to enjoy taking risks. We tend to be more comfortable in a habitual zone of having things be easy and smooth for us. But with compassion, as I said earlier, deepening our appreciation that the feeling of happiness and suffering is the same for everyone gives rise to greater sympathy for others' situations. And the more we can think deeply in this way, then the less our compassion will become just about watching a show or taking in a philosophy or a viewpoint, and the more it will become a situation where the suffering of others are actually a part of ourselves. And if we can cultivate compassion in that way, then I think our compassion will naturally come to entail more action.
The conclusion the Garasana, yet the interdependent language in the Garasana, Nazuki Sabana Shingi, Randa Shinsadi, the Tarum Buchi, the German Ibicha. 간다 아주 다들 저분인디 다 녀르녀 information 드레 다 녀르녀 주요하래 and 인도스탄 아주 디도 사물 sharing some each other some 드레 지기에 인상 아주 사번은 시지 나도 교사 다를 미되지 제자 디 circle 년내 니주디 괜니주 차대 괜니주 년니주 차대 도 차대 인도스탄 디 균zel 되네 아주는 기 코리아레스 아니 괜니주 인자 디 균zel 되는 년니주 인버지 다 드리지기 도하네 지레 삼정도 산토시나
Lassa. So to conclude that point, I would say that the reason I stress interdependence so much here is because although we appear to be separate from others and that others sometimes appear to be at a distance from us, we're actually very close to others. And the modern world is bringing that reality even more into the fore. Our world is becoming smaller and we're becoming even closer to everyone else we share the planet with. So we're sharing others' experiences of happiness and suffering even more. So even though I appear at a distance from you, you and me are actually much closer together than it appears to be the case. And his suffering appears to be different from my suffering, but his problem is actually, in reality, part of my problem. And my problem is, in reality, part of his or her problem. And when we become aware of that, then we begin to truly take responsibility. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
You answered all the questions I was going to ask.
Really?
Your Holiness, for I think many people in the audience, obviously you've had a very unique journey. And you've talked about this issue of being compassionate and related it to the environment. When in your own life did you realize the critical importance of protecting the environment? Were there certain events or was there a specific event that made you realize the importance of this work that you're doing related to the environment?
다디 그때기 건수는 이제 계속이 and period lumba kugyor which undeveloped and reinduced and traditional way of life somewhere with the digi insa energy chungdu susu ranjung kuul tanya was there digi gogob chungbre and dana shin gobdi dusane takarjwe bagzo maybe somewhere that they can unpolluted that digi kadar ku zangma chilia longja gogob chungbi insa and tigi the natural beauty and dana shingi natural environment the susu mizi narol ngusun jeba kan chhe yode ha hu ko ji and that ne de understand the gyunsen dene tigi da kan chowa sa ba je binza and the gyunsen dene and that ne da ro che bin and phele nga phele da kha ten da lo chang as to di na ni su mang bu da chung bre and phele ki ta ji kharom dang phele ki ji khan da de mang bu ji 슈로예 당 구유는 교와 첨부로예 봐. 근데 인도스탄에 enge samsa di jengdo penaji sosu ger gita karshwe desire ruchebi na ngaji pena pherji mangbaji love yimina ngoma na singde zidu de tontu mara samru
Lasso.
de gita karshwe simter
Lasso.
personal
Gyopa malokpa yana.
joba mara kisi marta
Oh, lasso.
if
Yeah. Okay.
okay
Oh. Sorry.
no need to explain okay no problem.
Well, as I mentioned before, I was born in a very isolated area of eastern Tibet that where the residents of that area lived a very traditional lifestyle, and we were very close to nature. And at that time, the area where we lived was very pristine, unpolluted, not affected by a lot of development at all. So I feel that that was a very precious opportunity for me to make a very direct and immediate connection with how beautiful the natural world is, and to really appreciate that. And because of that connection then, and appreciation of the natural beauty and importance of that area of the world, it's now been 15 years or so since I left Tibet, and I've learned more about what's happening to the environment there. The situation where there's ice and snow that are rapidly melting, and that's very impactful for the environment. And so that was really what gave rise to a natural desire to help. And then sometimes I think that if I were to return to Tibet, the sad thought occurs to me that maybe things wouldn't be as beautiful as I remember.
You've initiated some programs within the monasteries, of which you are the spiritual leader. In terms of the environment, maybe you could share with the audience some of those initiatives or some of the thoughts that you've put forth to your follower.
The action the mainly Gasuna Chudi said, and as we Pebeki or Gasuna Chudi said. Jezang Kuyugi Nedun the global issue charge that the Lamsan soap to the Kalakabushi. That you mean Misusugi, individuals, Susugi, Renata, Kadarchi Kanto do Shagwa, the catch me. And how about do Himalaya Dandana Pyogi, Satugi, Soviet Nalolia, Anne Gombahata, Chazun, Tizulia, Misegi, Chizolia, Shugandria, Nuba, Kalakansam Yinza, the Yunzed and Engozulia, energy, environment, Kuyugutone, education, data, awareness, Ruchumina, then they tell a dance, and the Mansoli, then they Shugin, Karsungyo Tolimina, Lopsum, Karshotaji, Shugin Sambatetua, that day or chasing as Gobatang of Chusachilia, that day, Kuyusungyo than Deve, Lopsuk, and a lingu, Mambush Bay artist.
In terms of my own actions, there's a phrase in the Tibetan Buddhist teachings that says...
No, not Buddhist teaching, in Tibetan.
Tibetan.
Yeah.
A Tibetan saying.
Yeah.
There's a Tibetan saying that says... that my actions are like a drop in the ocean, which in this case signifies that the environmental issue is a massive issue for the whole world. So the actions of one individual such as myself are obviously not going to be enough to solve the entire issue. But nevertheless, I feel it's really important for individuals to take up the cause of helping the environment and do the best they can within their own range. And so, in terms of my own contribution so far, I see the Himalayan region and the region of Tibet especially as very important for the environmental health of the world. And in that region and the society connected to that region, monasteries play a very influential role in the thought and behavior of the society. So my thought was to begin educating the monks and nuns who live at these monastic institutions in best practices related to the environment, and to give them more information and knowledge about why protecting the environment is important. And then if they transform their way of thinking about the environment and their practices in relation to the environment, this in turn will be a really helpful and positive influence on the society as a whole, because these institutions are so influential. So bearing this in mind, we've begun to institute some changes at over 50 monastic institutions in that region.
In terms of, there are many people in the audience who have children.
Yes.
And I know you're not married.
No.
But I'm sure many people Many people, though, would like to ask, for their own children, do you have any recommendations on how best they could educate their children in regard to perhaps not being so engaged in technology? At least, are any of your children involved with technology? How many of you are involved in technology? Yes. But of course, the future is in the hands of children. So how do we best serve the children in terms of educating them about the environment, or frankly, compassion itself? Do you have any thoughts?
Wow. Ooh.
That's an easy question.
Easy? I don't think it's easy. 배낭 아주 춘춘걸리야. 테크놀로지도 개개 강가요 말다 가르쳐야 되지. 아주 넘기 춘춘걸리야 점자 yap제디 텔라당 도당 싱다들이 마다 디사들이 개요 말아.
Lasso?
텔라도 도다 싱다들이 다 트라이스 양식으로 된 게. 아 드레인두스탄에 다 미세다 이나 아주 춘춘게 두산 다 파마츠기 다 가지고 every life they have significant somewhere 다 다나 신기 가르 자심이 뭐지 시가 제상 아주 무춘춘지 미네 안 들리야 가지고 간당 아주 들리야 자심을 지지 간달 숨겹지 아래 다나지 랑갈 드로에 거리야 아직 society careful 차 섭섭체제 아야 도지로 쇼여서 들으셔야 총리는 도시 용어야 알아. 제사 디균제대는 가다 파마츠기 가르쳐다 다기 권슈는 시래 compassion is somewhere 다 된데 조데 파마 코란리아 수술이야 compassion 이야데 개심 쉽지만도 something 도스 다디 이야기를 practice 야부예미나 and 디 유니제제 소소기 아니 다 부르드솔이미나 덴덴기 디 삼비 슈겐으로지 대투야디 바지 연구를 삼창 도스 근데 인두산에 아니 마온베기 다 나한테기 가르쳐다 미럽스 쳇도 아니 파마스 뇌네야 망치기가 쿠르르 렌체 아니 compassion 디스도 쳇디 개심을
Lasso? Well, when I was young, of course, there was not much technology to partake of, and most of the toys that I played with were made of either dust or stone or wood. And we didn't have these things that you could twiddle your thumbs with. But the one thing that I do remember is the example that my parents set, particularly with regard to the lives of other creatures. They really regarded every life as significant and precious, and they taught us about that. So we were taught to protect even little insects and to be careful when we were walking around so that we wouldn't squish them, and so on. And I feel that that was a very positive influence. And so really, with regard to your question about children today, I feel that this is one of the most important things, is for the parents themselves to practice compassion and try to develop compassion and improve their compassion. And if they're able to do that, then this will definitely have a natural and strong influence on their children, positive influence on their children. So that ties into the theme of responsibility as well, because I think if we as parents, or if those of us who are parents can take an attitude of responsibility for future generations as part of our reason for developing compassion, that will be very important.
Sometimes you hear statements made that in the West, there's a group of people, of course, who are pushing to preserve the environment, especially in the third world or the underdeveloped countries. But the argument from the underdeveloped countries is that, well, you've already destroyed your forests and have done all of these things, and now you're telling us what to do. Do you have any thoughts on that, or
Wow. Oh.
I guess that's
That is difficult. I don't know. Maybe that is. Daddy, you're sorry.
Lasso.
Daddy, Benji Kashre. She gave Shindagi natural resource. Peshu don't understand. Young grab is Sanglo. The Kini Sangma.
Lao.
Young gave Shinda. The dream we only use.
Lasso.
Not the day. That issue in a city. Kandar Tamatelia, Kandar as samology, interdependent kind of relationship, Yenza and Samololia impact the Samolo Yamdo on the Arabs, streams and the user than that and the compassionate. Dinanaja and Kashraji, Chipsy, decision maker, Chipsy, Tonum Gudici in this march, compassionate goes sometimes.
Lasso.
His job. Your job.
our job.
Yeah.
All of our jobs.
Yeah.
Well, that's a very tricky question in terms of how to deal with this phenomenon of some countries using the natural resources of other countries while at the same time sending all of their garbage to those very same countries. In the end, however, everything is interdependent, so whatever the results are of those types of actions, we're all going to experience them together, ultimately. And that's why compassion is so important. And with regard to this particular issue, I think this illustrates the need for our political leaders and political decision makers to have compassion.
One of the things that limit, and you mentioned this earlier, about recognizing the suffering of others or why more people don't participate or act is fear and being afraid of what might happen to them. And of course, this is one of the greatest difficulties, as we have seen throughout history, where people don't stand up for others who are suffering. And by doing so, they believe it protects them, and perhaps it does for a while. But do you have any advice for individuals who are fearful and who are scared? Is there a way that we can come to grips with that fear that you believe? Any advice or thoughts about how one overcomes their own fear of doing things that cause fear or that may cause them harm? Easy questions.
Easy questions. All your questions is not easy, I think. A little bit serious. Dirty need to Bena. Then also pepper summer the Gange the Teshim. Chesa and Naladi Gange the Rashing the Yondigare. Chesa Zen the Wunshu, Championship now, Yinza. That dinalolia Kashredaji involvement Shadi Kaburchiar, the Mimangujilia. Mimanguji until Chitin Shak, some that Yorosavresha, that dinaloli Chibina, Aran and Yangayos Sabruchi. Taibine Dadi, Arangi Gegi, Sonar of the Caressana. Kandar Tab Kevasan and Jandu. Kandar Tilia Kasher Chomang Bucini Kasher Chosini Shundu Meva Madabe, that Tapshiji, Pajiandi or something of those. That's all the Kashreda, the Tab Kebu Gone and Delia Kandris Robert Chai Madang, and Dana Singi Kandris and the Dinaro involvement Kandichigo, Tab Keva Summer. Takana Chomang Bucini, Shugayo. That music. Bena Tibetan issued with Chasha Yumina. 아니 미망부치기 디나로리아 슈가기 되버치기가 말 가라서나 미망부치기 다디 political issue 없이 뭐지 아들이 비슷한 political 난 로맨스 알지 제가 미망부치 된지 아주 따이빈의 베베 내려는 처지니 political issue 기체가 많아요 디나로라베나 최당 리숑당 고류당 망부치기 니주를 차대 예비 인두산에 수수기 에너지 가르에 디디지기 수수기 탑 개별관에 딱 하나 베네야나 디나로리아 인포메이션 쉐어입니다. 덴데 지 수수 펜더이 차지 용거로 마도베 인지민지 쇼비입니다. 남상 깔라 카보디 인고야 스케민도 와트린 인두산 디 긴저데네 미망부지기 디튼다 상로 망부 등기 예사마라 상 정도스 남상 삼로 답 대본으로 시당한지
맞습니다.
아다지 용투사 말에 삼버지 마다베 삼로 십자로 당한지 아니 삼로 년된 당비나 된된 아졸이야 탑시 방부지 예비지 초도
맞아. A good example of what your question points to is the Tibetan issue and the oppression that many Tibetans are facing and enduring. A lot of people don't want to get involved with that issue, and they kind of shove it off to the side because they feel it would be so difficult for them to become involved. Very difficult politics involved, and a very difficult situation seems intractable and so forth. But I think that if we approach it from the point of view of skillful means and really thinking about what methods are most skillful for us to engage with, then more avenues of engagement can open up for us. More avenues of becoming involved can open up for us. So some people might say, I don't want to be political, that's a political issue, but actually it's not just a political issue. It's a spiritual issue, it's a cultural issue, and it's an environmental issue as well. And I think that there's many avenues of engagement to bring about positive changes. It's not just the case that we have to do politics if we want to make a change, nor is it necessarily the case that we are going to put ourselves in danger or necessarily expose ourselves to great hardship simply through becoming involved. So it doesn't necessarily have to be that hard, but not a lot of people think this way. A lot of people immediately fall into the trap of just wanting to push it away the moment that it dawns in mind, saying that I don't want to go there. But rather, so if we don't think that way, if we actually think more deeply and thoroughly, then I think we'll see that there's many possibilities.
One of the things that we have learned from the science of compassion is how individuals, when they see another individual being compassionate, actually that makes them want to be compassionate. And it shows us really the power within ourselves of even simple acts of kindness can really have a profound effect on those around you. And I think that is a power that many of us oftentimes do not recognize the power within ourselves, and we underestimate what our power is.
Yes. Maybe that is not caution. I agree. Agree with you. Oh, that's.
One of my staff members, we had some, thanks for His Holiness. We have to, I wanted to.
Really? I have something to you also.
Oh, it's going to.
Inside. Okay. Yes. Secret.
But I just wanted, before you go, we have to actually make sure that this is the first stop, and we're going to have to put this here.
Wow. Thank you.
But no. We also wanted to get a few other things because we don't want you to forget that you're here. Now, we were at the bookstore earlier, and I was looking at a T-shirt, and he said if I was to get a T-shirt for him, it would have to be smaller. So he...
Thank you.
Yes.
XL. No problem.
And then one other T-shirt this is one that we have for Seacare, which is our logo here, but it says, "Got compassion." So this is...
Thank you. Compassion. Thank you. Thank you so much.
So
Thank you.
So thank you all so much for coming this evening. I hope that this has been a wonderful experience. It has for me, and I am so grateful that His Holiness has been with us this evening. And while he is doing that, my wife is in the audience, and I forgot to mention my wife, which I try to always do.
This for you. Something for you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.